Good morning and welcome to Forging the Falcons. It is Wednesday post-trade deadline and some big news. We're going to bring in our Facebook communities. We're live on YouTube right now at youtube.com/c/Scott Kennedy. We're going to bring in our Facebook community of Atlanta Falcons fans on All Falcons and Scott Kennedy Sports. So give us just a moment before we get cranking up as we bring in our big Facebook communities as well. So welcome in, everybody. I'm Scott Kennedy. This is Forging the Falcons on a post-trade deadline day. And for trade deadline day that finished at 4 o'clock, if you say the day starts at 9 a.m., a 7-hour day on a work day, for 6 hours and about 50 minutes of it, it looked pretty quiet for the Atlanta Falcons. But the last 30 minutes or so, about 3:30, the news started breaking that it started coming out that the Atlanta Falcons made a deal trading away Calvin Ridley. And finally kind of cutting that tie. It had been obvious to me since about Thanksgiving of last year. So let's wind back the clock a little bit. The second time that Calvin Ridley left the team was on Halloween. It was a Sunday morning prior to the Carolina Panthers game. And he let them know that morning he wasn't going to be playing, needed to take a break. That was the news that came out. Tweeted about it actually during the game. He says, I need to take a break during the game itself. So non-injury list, 4 weeks. 4 weeks later, we'll call that about Thanksgiving. Arthur Smith is asked about it. And, what do you think? Did he give you any indication that this was going to happen? And he's eligible to come back. Did he give you any indication that this was going to happen? And he was very, he's kind of snarky sometimes anyway, but he was very direct and angry in his response. He was basically like, you were here all week. You saw what we saw, which was nothing. We weren't given any indication. But it was, as soon as I saw that and saw the body language and the tone of his voice, I said, whoa, Calvin Ridley's done as an Atlanta Falcon. Done. And I've been saying that consistently since it happened. And that's how it played out. In the spring, it came out that he was going to be traded. I'm like, yeah, he's done. He's done as an Atlanta Falcon. It came out that he was going to be traded, but obviously they didn't trade him because as they were in the process of negotiating deals, the NFL contacts them and says, oh, by the way, the guy who took off for the year for a mental health break, we're going to suspend him for a year for gambling on games. Whether you agree with the rule or not, the rule is the rule. And that's one of the third rails in sports. You can get arrested for all kinds of stuff and do all kinds of nasty things. But if you bet on a game, you're gone for a year minimum. That's just the way it is. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. It's not your league. It's their league, and they make the rules. So we knew at that point that it was, that he was done as an Atlanta Falcon already. Now you had to sit around and wait for a year for something to happen. And it did. The Falcons get a conditional 2024 pick and a 5th-round pick for him. Nick is ready to join us from Seattle. I'm in Atlanta. Nick is in Seattle. So we are coast to coast with our coverage and a wide variety of we share a brand on a lot of stuff. Nick and I don't always agree on stuff. We're 20 years apart and 2 coasts apart, 3,000 miles apart. So we have different perspective on things. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm tired. I forgot to calculate all the time in to reset up my whole recording situation. So a little bit late, but that's okay. I can't find the little widget that goes with my cordless mouse. So going to have to be dealing with my hand working underneath here, but that's okay. I'm doing well.
Let's keep this PG, Nick. And what you do with your hand below the screen while you're working it, it's really none of my business. It's none of our business.
Between me and God.
Yeah, and the thing is here I am, 20 years older, almost 50, and we're still making sophomoric 15-year-old teenage jokes. It doesn't stop.
You have to.
Stop.
No, you have to. Yeah.
We're glad you're here. And again, yesterday ended up till about 3 o'clock yesterday. It was kind of not much going on. And then all hell broke loose. That's why there's a deadline day. And, one of the bigger stories of the day, the biggest story obviously being Bradley Chubb, who, we kind of kicked the tires on, would that make sense? Why or why not? But then the big news of the day for the Falcons fans and Jaguars fans, for that matter, was that Calvin Ridley is now the Jaguars have the rights to a suspended receiver who is allowed to apply for reinstatement in March. No guarantee that happened. That's one of the reasons why the initial compensation is so low. If Calvin Ridley makes the Jaguars roster, that 2024 upgrades to a third. If he is signed to an extension, it upgrades to a second. So my view on this, Nick, is this is Calvin Ridley for a 2023 fifth and a 2024 third, because he's making the roster. They're not going to. They've picked up his $11 million salary. They're not going to waive it in dead cap. He's making the roster. What was your gut reaction to that deal? And then we'll say hello to some folks in the chat.
I thought it was a really good deal for the Falcons, because I think Ridley, obviously, you've been saying it for a while. He played his last snap for the Atlanta Falcons, and I don't think he is exactly a scheme fit for what they're looking to do. Obviously, everybody can use talented receivers, no matter what. But to be able to get a pick this year and then a conditional pick next year, which, given the uncertainty still with him, makes a heck of a lot of sense. I do wonder, there has to be some way that maybe he doesn't make the roster still next year. Like if he's still suspended or some sort of language like that, where you wouldn't get that comp.
He shows up 40 pounds overweight, but then it's a fourth. Fourth. But there's a high probability that this is a third round pick, at least a third round pick, a fifth and a third. And then again, you get to lop $11.1 million off of your salary cap for a player who wasn't ever going to play a snap for you. Yep. My biggest concern is some technicality made it so that they had to just cut him and eat that guaranteed money on a cap. That to me was worst case scenario, because they would have. Calvin Ridley was never going to play for the Atlanta Falcons again. This is not Madden. They didn't get enough for him. What do you mean they didn't get enough for him? You haven't gotten anything out of him in 2 years. He's almost he's 28. He turns 28 next month. So in his last year of his rookie deal, he will turn 29 next year for the Jaguars. And then if they sign him to that extension that upgrades that third to a second, he'll turn 30. So he's not a young talented receiver. He's a guy who is supposed to be entering in his prime on his rookie deal. A guy who already left the team. The team has left him. That divorce happened. They've been separated for 2 years. Now they just signed the papers, Nick. It's one of those where, what do you mean you're married? Oh, yeah, I haven't seen my wife in 2 years. We just haven't gone through the technicalities of getting the divorce. This was a divorce. A third and a fifth is kind of how I put it in my mind. And $11 million of salary cap room. Done. Yep. That's done. This was a good deal for the Atlanta Falcons. Roll it back to 2020 and tell me this was a good deal, and I say you're out of your mind. This guy's worth 2 first-round picks. He blew that. Yeah. he blew that. If he comes back healthy this year and puts up another 1,200-yard season, but he got himself suspended for the year. He walked out on the team. I'm not going to judge the merits of that, but he hasn't played. He'll be almost 2 years without football, and he'll be 29 years old next year.
Yep, and just more reinforcements to keep chipping away and adding young talent, or move around, but young talent on the defensive side of the ball. We've said it on here a few times. Falcons might have the worst personnel on the defensive side of the football of any team in football, especially with A.J. Terrell getting dinged up the cornerback position. Don't really have an alpha pass rusher. Probably could still use another defensive lineman. And safeties and linebackers right now look meh. I mean, Richie Grant, Anderson, you have some potential building blocks there. But still, a ways to go there. All the resources they're getting right now, capital in terms of draft picks and salary cap, those are things that you can use to inject into the defense. And you know how quickly we saw this Falcons pass rush go from anemic to horrible, worse than the league last year, to probably like a C- level maybe. Yes, that's a huge step.
We're talking about there's ABC, your grades, in school are A, B, C, D, and F, but F is a wide variance. You could have a 69 was an F, at least for me it was in high school. Well, a 0 was an F also. This pass rush was a 15. They were an incomplete. They forgot to show up. Let's say hi to some folks in the chat. We got a good group coming in, and want to say hello. Aiden coming in. Aiden, appreciate you being here. Says good morning, everyone. Sad to see Rid go, but it was bound to happen. I'm sad to see what has happened to Calvin Ridley. At this point, I'm very glad to see him go, because I was terrified that some sort of technicality would mean the Falcons would have to sit on his $11 million of his guarantee of his fifth-year option and they weren't going to play him. They're just going to pay him to sit out. So I'm very happy to see this happen. But again, that it has had to happen is sad. Yeah, I get that for sure. But having already come to terms with that, this was a great deal. This is a happy moment for the Atlanta Falcons, having already come to the terms that Calvin Ridley was never going to play for the Falcons again. Kevin Mapp coming in on Facebook. Good morning. Good morning, Kevin. Joe Cannon, we chatted a little bit yesterday. He says, great morning, Scott, and eventually Nick. And Nick is here. So Nick is here. Albert Knopper's coming in over on Scott Kennedy Sports on Facebook. So appreciate you being here, Albert. Good to see you. Raymond Collins says, good morning. So blessed to have another day. Absolutely. Something we forget. We're into November already. I hope everybody had a good Halloween. Dominic coming in. Dominic Jaramillo, Broncos fan and big Georgia fan. I know he's looking forward to one of the more meaningful Georgia-Tennessee games in years. So it's been a while, and Raymond is definitely of a similar mind here. Ron L. Smith on Facebook saying, good morning, guys. Hope you're doing well. Same to you. Same to you. I'm happy that Terry Fontenot, Joe says this, I'm happy that Terry Fontenot got something for Calvin instead of just letting him walk. Exactly. You were going to get something, but the fact that this could end up being a second, a fifth, and $11 million in salary cap relief, that's a first-round pick. For me, Nick, that's the equivalent of a first-round pick. A rookie contract's about $12 million in total salary. So that's to me the equivalent of a first-round pick for a guy who has all of the warts that I already just mentioned. The fact that he'll be 30 in the first year of a new contract is enough to scare me off. Period. Let alone all of the other things that go with it.
And you got to be hoping that he does enough next year that he gets that contract, right? Going from a 3 to a 2. So it's kind of a weird situation where it's like, go Calvin Ridley and Jags pay that man because going from a 3 to a 2 that's a big chunk of change.
The irony on that, Nick, is if they do that, if he does play enough where they sign him to a second contract and don't just let him walk, then people are going to look back and say, oh yeah, we got a second round, but look what we should have had. Calvin Ridley was worth more than they got for him. Not to the Atlanta Falcons, he wasn't. Not there. No, he wasn't. I can't say it enough times. He was never going to play for this franchise again, whether that was his decision, their decision, mutual decision. So you're talking about a depreciating asset that right now is not even depreciating. It's bottomed out. It's not worth anything to you anymore. Luke Wright coming on YouTube saying, good morning, Scott and Nick. Good morning, Luke. Michael Ranquillo coming in from Arizona. Said, good morning, Scott and Nick on Forging the Falcons. Good morning, Michael. Antonio Langford saying, good morning, guys. Good morning. He's over on Facebook as well. So let me see. The chat is the Atlanta Falcons Facebook page is very active this morning. And as Kevin says, the pure fact that we saved the $11 million was enough. It was for me. It was for me. That was my concern. When this first happened, this is one of the things. Nick and I first started this show right when he was, suspended, right in that neck of the woods. And we talked about, and the Falcoholic did a really good job of breaking down what it meant. I'm like, are you still on the hook? Well, no, it was actually when he quit. That was when we first started the show, when he walked out on the team for mental health reasons. And I was like, what are the financial ramifications? Because if the Falcons are still obligated to pay him $11 million and it counts against the cap while he is sitting out, that is not good for his mental health because he's going to become an enemy. If he is hurting the team, it's one thing to leave the team, but to actively hurt the team via salary cap, that's not good for your mental health because no fans are going to be happy with that. So we hashed all that out and it was fine while he was away on a non-injury. His salary didn't count against the cap. Getting that money back is big for this team for sure. Raymond Collins says it could turn out to be beneficial for the Falcons. Again, no doubt in my mind. The bigger question, Raymond, how beneficial could it be to the Jaguars? This is a talented receiver that you could get, let's see, 28, 29, 30, 31, 4 prime years out of if he plays from 28 to 32 for a second and a fifth.
It could be longer. Could be longer for him.
But I mean, at that level, a really good level. There will be a decline at 32 years old.
Probably
for the best of them. For a player with his skill set,
He's a finesse receiver, though. So a lot of times the guys that rely a little bit more on craftiness and route running tend to last a little longer than the physical brutes that, let's foot race.
Right.
He's also missed, 2.5 years of football, 2 years of
Yep.
football where he hasn't been getting dinged. Now that means it could be a slower ramp on for him to get back up to speed, but maybe that extends his career a little bit beyond as well. So we're really in uncharted territory
Right.
with what's gone on with him. It's just speculation. Who knows what variables will
It
actually
could be,
factor.
and it could be how much does he want to work to stay at the top level?
Yeah.
We don't know those things. I always said Andrew Jones, the older one, now his son is kind of taking the opposite. But Andrew Jones was so good. Andrew Jones should be
Braves.
Hall of Fame center fielder from the Atlanta Braves, 9 Gold Gloves in a row or something, 400 plus home runs. You don't know who Andrew Jones, baseball player, one of the most physically gifted natural baseball players ever walked this planet. Was so good he never worked at anything. It just came to him. He was just a baseball player. So when he started losing it and you hit that age where, I actually have to watch what I eat. I can't just burn it off anymore. And I need to work this down. He was gone. He was done because he never had that heart, that Michael Jordan drive to be great, and that's what it takes to stay at that level once you break into your low 30s. So you don't know, but physically speaking, he should be in his prime for 3 or 4 years. And you're talking about a guy who should be a multiple year with Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback, 1,000-yard receiver for you. So it could be a really good deal for the Jaguars. I just think it's a higher risk. It's a high risk, high reward move, hedging that the worst case it costs us is a 4, a 5, and $11 million. Okay, that's not huge risk, but it's definitely not low risk either, Nick.
Yeah, they got to go out there and do some stuff for Trevor Lawrence. You're seeing that Justin Fields yesterday got himself a wide receiver. They're buying in on him. And now you see the Jaguars buying in the long term of Trevor Lawrence. And have a comment here from Aiden talking about Tua Tagovailoa and Josh Allen, who found themselves getting even better once the team brought in top receiver talent. You also can talk about Joe Burrow when they added Jamar Chase. So there is, something to that. I would say that Chase, Diggs, and Tyreek Hill are a different caliber or tier of receiver than Calvin Ridley. I know Calvin Ridley had a really good year, but those guys are, different physical presence, different ability. But I agree. You got to go out there and help your young quarterbacks, get them some elite talent. And that's something, when you draft Kyle Pitts and Drake London, you're not drafting them for this team. You're not drafting them for this quarterback. You're drafting them for the next quarterback. Now that could be Desmond Ridder, could be, who knows? But you are setting yourself up with the infrastructure and the support to plant a quarterback in there. And with the way the scheme is right now, offensive line improving, obviously you could still use probably maybe another true attached tight end. You've been fine there, but another wide receiver. Scott, I think we're going to disagree on this one a lot this year. Given this upcoming crop of free agents at running back, if you can get a short-term, like a 3-year deal where you're paying a good bit still, but a short-term deal for running back, I wouldn't hate that for how this offense functions. But you're going to have some room to build around whoever that next quarterback is.
I do like Caleb Huntley. I like Tyler Algier. Cordell will be here next year. Cordell Patterson will be here next year. I said it after the first game. Cordell had a monster game. It's like, no. I don't want him with 20 to 25 touches a game. It's not sustainable for him. He doesn't really know how to play at that speed to get 20, 25 touches. He still plays like he's a kickoff returner, and it's not sustainable. So, I want 10 to 12 touches a game for Cordell. Use him as that X factor. And, I think you've shown that you can win games with guys like Caleb Huntley and Tyler Algier, who are cheap. So, I don't want them necessarily spending money on a running back. But again, like you said, the running back is so important in this offense. If the running back is the star, so be it. And, I've been so anti-receiver the last 2 draft cycles because, again, the offensive line, the defensive lines were so bad that I didn't really care. And as we're seeing, as everybody's complaining, you're not using your receivers. I'm like, that's because your quarterback position, your offensive line has been unsettled. The quarterback position is still iffy as far as the passing game goes. Your offensive line looks really good, but now you're 2 out of 4 years, 5 years control of Kyle Pitts before you're really going to be into, what do we want to do at quarterback? And you still don't really know.
Yeah.
So, but for this team right now, you wouldn't break my heart if you told me they wanted to go get another receiver in the first round with they're picking 17. Okay, I can live with that. I still think your priorities for this team are probably number one, another corner opposite AJ Terrell because Casey Hayward's short term.
Yes.
Number two, an edge rusher. And number three, a wide receiver. That would be my priorities for this team. I could get by with Mariota and Ritter for another year. I could live with that.
Yeah.
I'd rather do that than take a quarterback I don't really love that falls to 19.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree with you mostly, but I'm going to be a little tongue in cheek with your list of order here. Number one, cornerback. Number two, edge. Number three, cornerback again, and then wide receiver. They really do. You got to have depth at that position. And right now, outside of Terrell, probably no long-term building block pieces on there. So depends on how the board falls. It's not an elite. At least right now, I don't see an elite cornerback in this upcoming class. And I got to get back into the first round draft lingo here. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see what happens. Broncos will probably trade out of the first round. That's my gut feeling right now. But definitely, it'll be interesting. But, just pivoting on that, the 2023 class, man, has a lot of good free agent running backs. Obviously, Barkley's going to get a big deal. But, I mean, could you get Kareem Hunt for a 2-year deal? Could you get Josh Jacobs for a 3-year deal? I think Donta Foreman has looked really good, actually, with the Texans.
They had Donta Foreman in camp.
I don't understand why
the Falcons had Donta Foreman in camp either this spring or last spring. I think it was this spring, but he was here.
Yeah.
And they elected not to sign him.
I wonder what's up with him because he's such an interesting style back. I think Josh Jacobs would interest me a lot. I know also Tony Pollard, I think, is a free agent at the end of the year who has been incredible for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know why they keep playing Zeke. So we'll see. But I think this team kind of sets up in a way where I know everybody's very anti-running back right now. I'm anti-paying running back long-term. If it's like a 5-year contract, stupid. 2 years, okay. That's you have a lot of flexibility. And if he gets hurt, darn, we're not hamstrung for the next 5 seasons.
Yeah, I agree. And as Ronell says, this was a huge step. I agree. And Kevin says, is there something fundamentally wrong with our scouting department? How do we miss so many high draft picks? Oh, I went through the draft, Dimitrov's last year. But so far, the high draft picks for Fontenot have panned out pretty well. I think Richie Grant is redeeming himself as a second round quality starter. The only big swing and miss so far as high picks go would be Jalen Mayfield for me. If I'm looking through this class, I say Drake London, he's a hit. Drake London's a good wide receiver, really good. I liked seeing those defensive backs come in and hit him and bounce off, and he's still good. It's like, I like the bigger receivers, man. I do. One of the safeties came in and popped Kyle Pitts over the middle, and the safety went backwards and fell down and was shaken up. And Kyle Pitts points for first down. I'm like, I like it. Arnold Ebiketie, hit. That looks good. That looks like a good pick for me, Nick. Tyler Algier, Taquan Graham. Those are fifth round picks. Good. Taquan's playing like a first round guy for me. He's in his second season. Taquan Graham is playing like a first rounder. He is. I was watching a play, and I see 90 curvy letter flash in and just break up the play completely. I was like, Ogundeji making a play. Good. He hasn't made many. He hasn't been very good. And he gets up and it was 95. I'm like, oh yeah, I was Taquan Graham. That makes more sense. So Kevin, Terry Fontenot has helped to revamp the scouting department. And as far as I'm concerned, they're doing really well. You're sitting there at first place and 4-4 with nickels and dimes to pay free agents and working off of your draft class. And I think this team is very far ahead. But last year, under Dimitrov, yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. And Kevin says, and Dom says, good morning, Nick. He said eventually, but you were here. Kevin says, on the flip side, the Jags are nuts. Well, we talked about Nick and I hit on that just a little bit. It's a high risk, high reward. And I think the reward is higher than the risk. That's a deal you might not, you don't mind taking.
Yeah, they got to do something out there to continue to fortify and just give Trevor Lawrence a chance. That maybe this was the best one that they thought fit their scheme and was a relative buy low. Maybe they're betting that this season, maybe it's going to be a higher draft pick, but come 2023, they're going to be right in the thick of things in their belief. And that pick is not going to be as high as it would have been this season. So we'll see how it plays out. It definitely is a roll of the dice for them, given he hasn't played. And forget all the other stuff, given that he hasn't played in nearly, 2.5 years.
What is that? Because he didn't. He played 5 games and he was crap last year. For one reason or another, he wasn't any good last year. So it'll be 2 years since he played. Like I said, if this was the people that are, oh, this deal was terrible. They got robbed. They should have gotten more. They think it's 2020. Like, this isn't 2020. He's damaged goods considerably. And if it turns out to be a second and a fifth and they're taking over his entire salary, that's a hell of a deal for damaged goods. So, again, it's a high risk, high reward. The reward is higher than the risk because there's mitigating factors in there. If it ends up costing $11 million, a 4 and a fifth, that's worst case for the Jaguars. That's not crippling. That's an inconvenience if you've structured your salary cap okay. Michael coming in saying good morning, guys. Good morning, Michael. Appreciate you being here. And Joe Cannon, there was other news. There were 10 trades, I think, that were announced yesterday, a record, and the Falcons were involved in 3 of them. He says, outside of the Ridley trade, I like the Fenton trade. He brings a veteran presence to our young secondary. Nick, how much did you get to watch Rashad Fenton with the Kansas City Chiefs, and what were your thoughts on him other than just, what I can read off from Pro Football Reference and tell you what he has done in the past?
I think he's a pretty mediocre cornerback where if you're starting him, you're not really excited about it, but he's also not, somebody who's going to be off a roster level terrible. So with the injuries the Falcons had at the cornerback position, you go out there, you trade.
Mediocre's good.
Yeah. He's like, you like him as your 4th cornerback or somebody who can come in and get some reps. Kind of like where Broncos are at with Michael Ojemudia right now. It's like, if he's out there, we're not loving life, but also it's not that 3rd string guy who's going to be off the roster when you're kind of filling things out in preseason. So what is the 7th round pick, conditional pick on there?
I couldn't find anywhere that said what the conditions were. I looked, the official site didn't say anything. I didn't see anything on it. So I don't know what the conditions are for that to be a 7th, or what happens if they cut him. Does it go away? I really don't know. I just want to remind you, Nick, that Cornell Armstrong was chasing around DJ Moore.
It's bad. I'm not saying this was a bad move.
Mediocre, a 7th round pick for a mediocre starter, even on a short-term rental for a team that is in first place.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take it. That's a good deal. If you can get average cornerback play from him, I'll take it. And then get a healthy AJ Terrell back, and then hopefully Casey Hayward comes back in. Now my depth is looking better.
Yeah.
Now my depth is starting to look better at the cornerback position. Because Hayward and Terrell are good. Darren Hall is okay. Cornell Armstrong is who he is. Nickel, you got Isaiah Oliver. Now I'm looking okay. If I've got a full stable for this year, and hell, maybe they get into the playoffs and everybody's healthy. Maybe.
Yeah, this was a move to stabilize the cornerback position over the next short term because you probably couldn't have gone out there with what you had after the injuries and make a good, honest run at the playoffs this season without giving up really anything for the future. It's a move that, giving your position, let's say the Falcons were 2-6 right now. This isn't a move you're making, but at 4-4 in first place, we got to be able to hold things down for the next 3-4 games or whatever it is with AJ Terrell and have another body back there that at least we feel okay with. And I think that's what it is with Fenton. He's not a great cornerback by any means, but he's rosterable and good enough that you're happy to have him on here and can stabilize things for a bit.
And on that note, it basically ended up a swap of players because as Terry Ocean Boy Martin Jr. comes in, he says, very productive day yesterday. Love the direction we're headed. Very much so needed that back-end help with Rashad Fenton. Last year, he was the Chiefs' highest-graded quarterback across the PFF, and we swapped him for Dean Marlowe. So that was the 3rd pick. Dean Marlowe was sent back to the Buffalo Bills. That's where he played, and for a 7th. So the conditional 7th that you sent them, you got one back from the Bills. So it was basically trade for trade. You didn't lose any draft capital. You stayed even there, and you traded Dean Marlowe for Rashad Fenton. You're okay at safety. You needed more help at corner. And last we saw Marlowe, he was falling down on DJ Moore's back into the end zone for a touchdown. That can't happen. I read through the comments when the Buffalo Bills announced a trade on Twitter, And the Bills fans were really happy to have him back. They said he knows the system, a veteran, and he played well while he was here. So sometimes it just doesn't work out. He didn't play much in Atlanta, but unfortunately for him, he'll always be remembered for that play. Luckily, we'll also be remembered for Pinheiro hooking a couple balls, and we have Young Yoeku, and you don't. So it worked out okay, but the Bills were happy with this. I think the Falcons were happy with this. So overall, I think a pretty good day. Strive to Glory, 1988. That's a cool picture. Looks like some
bird on an arrow,
prey riding an arrow.
Yeah.
But he says, this is a shock to me, honestly. Okay, well, hit us up. We're not so busy in the chat that I can't find your reasoning, but why would it be a shock? Is it just because the last you remember of Calvin Ridley, he was really good in 2020, and you're like, okay, when he comes back, this is what we need. We need a guy, a slot receiver or a route runner that can take some pressure off Pitts, and he's a perfect fit for what this offense is missing. He might be, but we're not dealing with computer games. I say this all the time. You're dealing with people and personalities, and the people management of the coaches is as important as the personnel you bring in and their skill sets. And Ridley wasn't playing for this team again. Baseball for me is as much at the major league level as man management as much as anything. Especially with the DH, what strategy is there? Should I take this pitcher or not? I don't even have to think about when to put him in because there's rules about all that now, and I've got a designated hitter. It's man management. It's keeping everybody on an even keel and pulling in the right direction and the team chemistry. And Calvin Ridley didn't fit in that anymore. So he was always going to be gone. He wasn't ever coming back, which meant he was always going to be gone. But Nathan brings up some irony on this. He says, it's hilarious to me they got traded to the team he was betting against. It is a little ironic, isn't it? If that was I didn't remember that, Nathan, so appreciate who it was. I just knew he had some parlay in a FanDuel app or something that's plastered all over the stadiums on where you should do your betting and sponsors every other NFL show and everything. But, by God, don't do it if you're a player. But they know that. The same thing we said about someone like Randy Gregory or Randy Moss or Warren Sapp, who's draft stock or they get suspended because of marijuana. Whether you think it's a big deal or not, it's still the rules. I didn't always agree with my parents' rules, but I knew if I broke them, there were consequences. Yeah. So that's the way it is. When someone else is paying the bills, they get to make the rules. When you're running your own league, you can make the rules.
Yeah, no, it is hilarious that it was traded to team he bet against. And again, Falcons fans, maybe you have a little bit of conflicting feelings about Ridley's time here and, the flashes that you got and then everything kind of falling apart with the betting and then the weird money scheme thing as well. It's
a lot of drama there, Nick.
There's a lot of drama. But for him as a human being, I hope he gets it together and things in Jacksonville work out for him. And also for the Falcons, you hope it works out for him at least in 2023, because going from a 3rd round pick to a 2nd round pick is quite valuable. So you're hoping he does enough to get a contract extension. So that way you're picking somewhere from 33 to 64 rather than 65 to 96.
And Dana Miller coming in says, good morning, everyone. I'm good with the trade. I think most folks are, and I was reading through, it's an ESPN insider story. So apologies if you don't have that, but I'll read the Falcons trade and I'll post it in the link, which, I like to do. Post that in the chat. It gave them a B-. It gave the Falcons a B- and said that they probably could have done better if they had waited. Maybe. But now they can shop in the offseason knowing they've got that $11 million, So what was the person's name that wrote this? Let me see. His name was Sam Walder. And Walder says, a trade is difficult to evaluate from a Falcon side of things. In a vacuum, they probably would want to keep Ridley. Exactly, which is a video game. Vacuum. This isn't a vacuum. It's quite possible all involved needed a fresh start. But would the Falcons have been better off waiting until the new league year, by which point Ridley might have already been reinstated to trade him? It's hard to know, but the fact that compensation struck me as light and that the impending free agent wide receiver class is weak has me wondering if they could have gotten more if they waited. They could have. They could also ended up with Bupkis if they waited. So a B minus, I'd go B plus on this one at least, if not A minus on this one. So good morning, Dana. Appreciate you being here. And Raymond, we were talking about the draft picks. Mayfield has been a bust so far. Otherwise, things are looking good for the future. Yeah. And that one hurt for me. It's worked out okay because, Caleb McGarry has stepped up if you can re-sign him. But when you're drafting Mayfield to put pressure on Caleb McGarry at right tackle, and then as soon as he walks into camp, you have to move him to guard because you realize he wasn't a tackle to begin with. Wasn't really a guard either. He never played guard. And Spencer Brown's still on the board, who goes 30 picks later, who works his way into the starting lineup for a Super Bowl contender. That one hurt. That one hurt. And the thing is the Falcons, Nick, the Falcons have drafted like 12 players from the Senior Bowl under Terry Fontenot, and you didn't take Spencer Brown? He was the best prospect there, man. So
yeah,
I'll get off on that one. I'll stop for a little while.
I would say McGarry's played better than Spencer Brown this season, and Spencer Brown probably cannot play guard given his body type. I think he'd get forklifted by heavier, bigger guys with leverage. So
that was the thing, is though, Nick, one of the things that was so interesting to me about, he's 6'8". So if you're asking his body type, Spencer Brown was 6'8". He also had a 500-pound bench press, and he didn't have hugely long pterodactyl arms. So he had arm length, was actually a little shorter, giving him a little better leverage for a guy who was, closer to 6'6". But what was interesting to me, Nick, about watching him, and one of the reasons I liked him so much, is if he was on the far side of me, let's say I'm watching and the offense is going right to left, I can't see the right tackle. But you think a 6'8" guy, I could. He was so flexible and so bendy, he would disappear down behind the guard. And I was like, wow, this guy's got bend at 6'8" with a 500-pound bench press and a 35-inch vertical leap. And what's he do when he gets engaged with people? He motors them. So, yeah, Spencer Brown was missed by every team in the league because he lasted until about pick 100. Yeah, and Terry comes in. He says, if you're shocked by the Ridley trade, that just tells me that you had Calvin in the plan and the Falcons felt differently. Yeah, it's nice having Calvin on your Madden roster because you can do something with him. I mean, he's a talented 90 rated receiver. Wasn't ever coming back. EJ has a good question. He says, can Calvin Ridley be the same player after the time off? What do you think?
Probably not the same. He can still be quite good, but he had a couple of really good seasons there for the Falcons there, statistically speaking. So probably not. Also with Calvin Ridley, he's such a precision type of player. And right now, Trevor Lawrence's biggest issue is quick game and accuracy in the underneath routes. So you still want to have those guys who can run routes where it's man coverage and it's like, okay, third and 6, we need a winner in a single coverage. Let's dial something up for Ridley here. He's going to beat his man in single coverage. But I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is exactly the best fit for him given his play so far. Now, still believe in Trevor Lawrence. I think he's going to figure it out. But I don't think he's going to put up what he did in years prior when he was at his peak.
Well, Matt Ryan was accurate as hell. I mean, that was the biggest thing. And if I've got a route running receiver and I've got a good timing quarterback who has good accuracy, that's a pretty good fit. That said, for not being a burner, and I've said this a zillion times, Nick, if you take this quote out of context, I'm going to sound like a moron, but speed is overrated. I having a guy, this guy runs a 4.3. How come he can't get on the field? Because that's all he does is run a 4.3 in one direction. Those guys are easy to take out of games. So Calvin runs really good routes and knows how to use his body to get defensive backs off balance and gets behind guys who are faster than him on a stopwatch. So the arm strength of Trevor Lawrence could pay dividends. And Calvin should, if he's putting the work in, he should be every bit as physically good as he was before, if not better. We're talking about a guy who was, weeks away from walking out the last time we saw him. But, as Kevin says, we have a new scheme and culture and Ridley doesn't fit either. I agree with that partially. I also agree that, if Zacchaeus can be a target in this offense, and he has been, Calvin Ridley can be effective in this offense. He doesn't have to be Kyle Pitts and Drake London. That's what you got those guys for. He doesn't have to be Braylon Edwards, the big guys. I can find a spot along that line of scrimmage for a good, talented receiver that has good hands and knows how to get open. I can find a spot for him in my 11 for sure. Yeah. So I don't want to downplay what a player like Ridley would have meant to this offense. It would have been really, really nice. Just wasn't ever going to happen. Wasn't ever going to happen. So there's no point in saying, we didn't get enough. We should have, he would have been good. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. It doesn't matter. He was gone. Gone Gonzalez. Not Tony Gonzalez, but Gonzalez. Eric coming in. Say, welcome, Eric. Appreciate you being here. He says, seriously, a new era. It is. It is a new era. And that's what I've said about before, Nick, about the culture change of the Atlanta Falcons. And Dean Pease came out and said it. One of the benefits of getting older is you get to stop caring what people think about you and worrying about what you say. And Dean Pease has been around a long time, and he says, I'm tired of it. It's on my YouTube channel. I can play it again. He says, we're gonna change a culture in this place, and he was talking about defense, but I'm talking about all of it. No excuses. There's plenty of excuses for this team to lay down and not fight. There's legitimate excuses between the injuries, the salary cap, and the roster full of retreads and rookies. There's plenty of excuses, but they fight. That's part of the culture change that's coming. So, Eric, I agree with you. Ray coming in. Ray, good morning. Glad you're able to make it in before we are just leaving. He says, we were not that aggressive at the trade deadline. Do you agree? Nick, what do you think?
I think you were just the right amount of aggressive. Being able to move on long-term perspective and get some draft capital and free up some cap space with the whole Calvin Ridley situation, but then also patching a hole and bringing in Fenton the short term because you needed a body immediately. I also saw somebody in the comment section said the Falcons should probably bring in Sidney Jones if they can. You have an 8th in the waiver order, bringing another cornerback body in here. I think that's a good idea. So I think it's just the right amount of aggressive. I don't think you needed to go out there and, spend crazy draft capital because you're still building this infrastructure on this team. You arrived early. The fact that you're in first place right now is a testament to the scheme and the coaching, maximizing the talent that you have, and also a craptastic NFC South so far. So don't lie to yourself being like, okay, we got to go now. There are teams that are in go for it now mode. Falcons are not. So the ability to fortify the cornerback position after the injuries, but also move on from Ridley, get future draft capital, and set yourself up to have more resources going forward, I think is just the right amount of aggressive, knowing who you are, where you are as a team.
And Ray, I don't know if you've heard me use this expression before, but I've used it several times, is that it's fool's gold. The NFL is set up to give everybody a chance. It's set up where 3-5, halfway through the season, you're a game out of the playoffs, but you're not worth a damn. The Falcons aren't a good football team right now. That's not necessarily true. As a team, as a unit, they're okay. They're 500. They're about where they should be. They're outplaying their personnel is what I mean by this. And
credit to the coaches, man.
Credit to the coaches, credit to the players, credit to the general manager for bringing in guys that are on one-year deals and are playing for their jobs.
Yeah.
All of that was by design. Everybody there is either on a rookie deal, hungry to prove themselves, meaning they're underpaid because they're on rookie deals, or they are one-year guys. Every single person there. So I didn't want them, as Nick likes to say, to take the cheese. Oh, we're in first place. Let's trade away part of our future in order to chase a playoff in 2022. You're ahead of schedule. You're a year ahead of schedule right now. Stay the course. You're now sitting with, what's interesting, you're now sitting with 2 4ths and 2 5ths. Now, if you would package something like that together to get a guy maybe for this year, that would have been okay. Okay, we're going to trade an extra 4th and a 5th. We still have all these picks. Okay, good. But then I would have been okay with it. But I don't want to say, oh, yeah, I want to give away a first and $20 million a year for Bradley Chubb. Hell no. We said that yesterday, Ray. That would have been aggressive. And that would have been falling for the fool's gold. Now you've got your salary cap. You've got a bunch of extra picks. And the plan has always been to begin this rebuild in earnest in 2023. That you're a year ahead of schedule shouldn't change the plan for me. It shouldn't. Stick to that plan, and you can build something sustainable. You can build something sustainable where you're good year after year after year after year, and not sell the future for the fool's gold that you're 4-4 right now and could fool yourself into thinking you're a Super Bowl contender. weird, stranger things have happened. Maybe no, there's nothing stranger than if this Atlanta Falcons team, made a run in the playoffs. That would be about as strange as anything I've ever seen. But I didn't want them to be overly aggressive, Ray. I didn't want them to be. I don't want them falling for the fool's gold.
Yeah.
And you don't really have anything that you wanted to give away, that you wanted to trade away either. So the other part of that was aggressive selling. This team shouldn't be sellers either, right? Don't you think? I mean, you look around. Who would you trade away from this team besides Calvin Ridley? Everybody's young. All your key players are young.
You already done it when you traded away Deion Jones. I think that was the one. And you, again, talk about ahead of schedule. One of the first moves leading up to this trade deadline. So moved on from Ridley, moved on from Deion Jones. I mean, maybe you, I know you maybe did you draft him last year or 2 years ago, but Ogundeji has been not great. Maybe you can flip him for a 7 to free up more spots out there. But other than that, you're right. It's mostly young. There are not these guys at their end of their rookie contract, other than Calvin Ridley, that you're looking to move on from, or veterans that, the Robert Quinn style of trade that we saw with the Bears to the Eagles. So we'll see how it plays out. No doubt. But again, arriving early, and you talked about an additional 4th round pick, an additional 5th round pick. You have all this cap space next year. What are the Falcons going to do? You can be buyers next year on the veteran trade market as well. Now that's, you talk about arriving on time. Next year, if there's an edge rusher who's a 32-year-old that only has 2 years left on his contract, decent size contract, you can eat that money, only give them a 5th round pick, have no guaranteed money on that contract, and have an instant fortification on your team with that draft pick. Doesn't mean you have to do that, but with those, especially those 4th and 5th round picks, I feel like that's a lot of times the best ROI teams get on those deals. The Baltimore Ravens have made a living on that over the last 4 to 5 years and really helped their team out.
And Nick, the wonderful thing about this owner is you don't have to worry about the money being available. How many people have watched Moneyball when, Billy Bean's trying to make a play and he's like, hold on, I got to talk to my owner, and he's haggling over $100,000 to throw in. If the salary cap money is available, the cash is available. You don't have to worry about that with Arthur Blank. And Mario G, we were talking about, Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley, that hookup. Matt Ryan is overrated via the bench he's riding. We're not talking about 2022 Matt Ryan. We're talking about 2000 Matt Ryan and his connection with Calvin Ridley, which was really, really good. And Eric Max is a true Matt Ryan and Tom Brady have regressed. Yeah, they're 40, man. Between the two of them, Matt's 37 years old. He'd been sacked 24 times this year, taking a beating behind that cold offensive line, which wasn't, it shouldn't have been as bad as it was. And Tom Brady is 44? This used to happen at 10 years prior. The rules have changed so much in nutrition and exercising that guys can extend their careers, but it does happen eventually. And Mario's follow-up on that was Calvin Ridley is definitely more valuable than the position the Falcons are in right now. Calvin Ridley has no value right now because he can't play. So, and he wasn't ever going to play for the Falcons. So his value to the Falcons was what could you get for him in a trade? And Eric coming in again, he says, I can see the Falcons drafting a wide receiver this spring. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will bet anybody, whatever you want to bet, that the Falcons come out of this draft. Right now, they're sitting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 picks. They've got 9 picks in this draft. They will get at least one wide receiver. They will get at least one cornerback that they come out of this draft with. I will be shocked if they don't. Kevin asked, what are the odds Dean Peace retires after this year? Nick, what do you think? Do you think he's in it for at least one more year, or do you think this would be his last season?
Oh, God. Honestly, I have no idea. I don't know Dean Peace personally enough or any of his circumstances in life, but he's got a team he's holding down pretty well, and I think playing above their talent level and especially their spending level right now. So I think it'd be a little bit shocking to move on from him or have him retire right when it seems like this team is set up to finally fortify his unit. That being said, given his age, if you are bringing in somebody new, maybe it is smart to have that happen prior to spending all this money on this side of the ball, because you want that defensive coordinator, whoever it is, to have a huge influence on the types of players that are brought in. So I don't think it'll happen. And I think he's done a good job this year, all things considered. But who knows? He's definitely on the older side of things, and maybe after this season had been enough for him. Impossible to say from where we sit.
Ray comes in and asks, and we'll have to dig into this, available free agents, and you never know, who's in the last year of their contract and who is going to be available are very different lists. As people make salary cap moves, you'd have to go through everybody's list and check guaranteed money versus dead money, because that's players that could be available. He might have 4 years left on his deal, and he's not going to show up in a list of pending free agents. But if he's got a $12 million salary and a $2 million dead cap hit, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be available. So, but I right now, I think more of positions, Ray. Who should we go after next year with all the money we got? Who could be I've said before, I think the Falcons only had 4 or 6 guys that were making over $4 million a year on this team. That's a quarter of a lot of other teams. So with that $100 million that should be available once all is said and done, once they make all the moves and all the cuts and shuffle everything out, you could go from 4 to 25 guys making $4 million a year. How much would that help the depth on this team when an injury goes down and I'm able to bring in a $4 million corner to replace somebody instead of somebody I pulled off of a practice squad last week? The depth on this team. There will probably be somebody that's a marquee signing. Who is that? Corner, edge, receiver. Those are my 3 right now. You're also going to have to spend some of that money to re-sign some guys, Ray. Caleb McGarry's compensation is probably going to go up 6-fold. I think he's on about 2 this year. He could be 10 to 12. He's played that way, crazy as it sounds. Yeah. He's played that way. Lindstrom is on will be on his 5th-year option next year. McGarry's was declined, so he is a free agent. You're going to want to re-sign McGarry. There's going to be a decent chunk of change right there. But cornerback, you got to go get in a corner opposite Terrell. Have to. Casey Hayward was a stopgap. A good idea. I liked it. I'd want another safety. Then you can start talking about depth. But corner, edge, wide receiver. And as Nick said, tongue-in-cheek, go ahead, Nick.
Running back?
Corner.
Oh, corner. Yeah, corner. And also, I mean, you really just want to get good players in here. If you're running this much 12 personnel, maybe there's another tight end that you're interested in bringing in that can live in the attached to the line of scrimmage world. Maybe also there's you kind of mentioned it there a little bit, not a value position, but sometimes I like to pay the not as valuable positions because you get them at a discount compared to the market, and then use draft picks on the value positions. I talk about Moneyball. Right. You can do that a little bit. So paying a tight end a little bit, paying a safety rather than having to use a 2nd or 3rd round pick on those positions.
Meanwhile, I got my skill guys on rookie deals.
Yeah. So that kind of thing to look out
means
for.
You better hit
as well.
Nick.
Yeah.
Means you better hit in the draft.
Yep.
And so far, Kyle Pitts is a hit. Drake London is a hit. And you've got them for 3 more years, cost control, 4 more years for London. Mariah G has a comment. I want to hit the flip side of this. The Falcons continually disappointing the fans, and not just the losses, but the moves they're making don't look like they're thinking about the coming years. Mario, I would say when you trade away a guy who isn't going to ever play for you again for salary cap space and 2 draft picks, those are all about the coming years. 100% about the coming years. Certainly wasn't about this year. And again, Mario, just put it in your mind, and it makes this whole lot easier to think about. Calvin Ridley was never playing for the Falcons again. Not ever. No way. No how. So come to grips with that, and you'll realize that, okay, what could we get for him then? So for sure. And Dave comes in on YouTube. He says, the next big issue is Matthews. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's the last ugly contract. The ugly contracts that the Falcons had were Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, Deion Jones, 1, 2, 3, you're out, and Jake Matthews. Nick, what scares me about Jake Matthews is that they have restructured him again and again and again. And next year, he's got a $33 million cap hit, where I think the highest cap hit at tackle this year was like 21. That's a 50% increase. Yeah. They're going to want to restructure him again, which just kicks that dead cap down the line. At what point do you say we can't do restructures? We just have to eat one of these big numbers so we can get out from under this deal and start having options. I don't think it's going to be next year because he ain't playing on a $33 million deal.
It could be somewhat next year, though. You could get that down to 28 rather than 33, and because you have so much salary cap space next season, maybe that's one where it's just accounting. We're rolling over some cap space now, and the cap hit is going to look big, but then we have flexibility going forward, and maybe this is a draft where you continue to lean into the offense. I know you've liked Elijah Wilkinson so far this season, but there's a couple offensive linemen in this class that could probably play first couple years at guard and then flip out to tackle when giving you flexibility with Matthews' contract going forward, and also further fortifying this offense, building an identity with the heavy run game, protecting the quarterback, and infrastructure around whoever that next quarterback is. So definitely something to consider and watch there. I agree with you. 33 million isn't the best, but I'm very much a pay off that credit card when you can. I don't really like to accumulate debt. So if you have to eat it for 1 year, especially when you have so much cap space next season, maybe it's something you consider just to get yourself in front of that. I can't buy as much.
Do that, yeah. Nick, if they would do that, like they had the stones to eat $40 million of Matt Ryan dead cap money. If they would do that, then they'd be out from under his contract. 1 year. 1 year in 2024, I'm out from under all the bad contracts are gone.
Yeah,
they're done. The ghost of Dimitrov past would be over.
Yeah, so
would be done. Chris Walker commenting on Dean Peace. He says about his retirement. Says, God, I hope not. He's finally going to have enough pieces to work with to be really effective next year. His ability to evaluate talent and coach has been the best we've had on that side of the ball since Glanville under Lehman Bennett as head coach. Chris, you don't look old enough to be talking Jerry Glanville in the 70s, Grits Blitz, and the 1980 Lehman Bennett's. I was 7 or 8 years old when that was going on. But yeah, that was good times. But yeah, Dean Peace is I get frustrated with fans at some point when the coaches, what are they doing out there? Look at this. Just look at the team. You're out there with Cornell Armstrong, Dean Marlowe. There's pieces out there you can't compete with at that level. And it makes me a little nervous of what Justin Herbert can do with this against this team if AJ Terrell isn't out there and we're moving some guys around. But I hope Dean Peace is around at least 1 more year as well.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you never know, man. Those kind of things happen. Maybe he wants to do something else for a bit, but we'll see. No doubt. And Kevin Mapp, Chris, I agree. Hope he holds out a couple more years at least. And we got the diabetic life of Kid Cam in all caps. We did talk about Calvin's mental health issues and depression and taking time away from football. A lot of times that's such a personal thing that I don't want to dig into it and try to guess the psyche of somebody that I've never met before. All I know is that I hope things are okay. I don't know if that stuff is related to the other stuff that went on in his off the field life, but pulling for him, the person, and hope he finds success and happiness and fulfillment in Jacksonville.
And it's also impossible for us to predict what effect that's going to have on him moving forward. Impossible.
Yep.
Impossible. Like I said at the time, I'm like, for all I know, he's an addict of some sort. I hit 25 years sober, so I speak from experience. And if you can get that stuff behind you, you can come out stronger. You don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. So that's one of the reasons we're not going to harp on it, and we'll harp on the things we do know, or at least have legitimate questions about. Kevin Mapp says, is our quarterback of the future a potential free agent? You know who they're talking about, Nick? Low. The talk is that the Falcons will put together a big old package to go after Lorenzo Jackson. Or
Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson, apologies. Yeah, Lamar Jackson. Lorenzo, I got Lorenzo Carter in my brain, but is Lamar Jackson. So
God, I would love that. I mean, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. I'm like, picturing him in a Falcons uniform, and this offense would be incredible for him. I mean, it really would be an amazing fit for him. So will be interesting to see. Scotty, you still with me? You look a little frozen there.
I'm still here. Do I need to bounce out?
All right. I'm not sure if Scott's frozen or if you guys are frozen.
Am I back now?
Is it me? Is it Scott?
I think he must be frozen. It seems to be okay. Just give us a heads up on that. I think it might be Nick. Might be us. Let me see. Been having some problems with this. So I'm going to hit Simon Weeb coming in with a super. Appreciate you coming in. Canadian says, the first time catching the show live, not up to speed with the Falcons. So given a year or two of drafting a quarterback, how far are the Falcons from the playoffs? 1 year away. They could be a legit they could make the playoffs this year through circumstances that don't necessarily mean they're what you would consider a playoff team. Meaning the NFC South sucks. Tampa Bay is going poorly. The Falcons are out playing. They could be a legitimate contender, good team next year. They're a year ahead of schedule, Nick. That's what we've been saying. They're a good team now with a solid core and a solid nucleus and good coaching, and they're going to have draft picks and they're going to have free agent money. They've had some good draft picks. They haven't had any free agent money in 3 years. So the first time they're going to be playing with monopoly money for these guys. So they can be a legitimate playoff team 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, just because you have the cash doesn't mean you have to spend it. We've kind of seen the Jacksonville Jaguars as the example of this. A lot of Jags talk today they're throwing money out left and right and paying guys like crazy and then stuck with these mediocre players on big contracts. The best thing you can do as a team is to re-sign your own guys because they're talented enough to those market deals before they ever hit free agency. A lot of times if guys hit free agency, there's a reason those players hit up there. They're meant to be supplemental or complementary to your core that most of the time you've either traded for or drafted because those guys don't typically hit free agency. So don't just need to spend, even though there's going to be some money next year. That said, you can quickly turn around a defense with these short-term, 2-year, 4-year, middle tier defensive contracts for players. That's something the Falcons, I think, will look at heavily next offseason, but got to keep building up that core and not overspend on contracts just because you have the room in the bank to do so.
Nathan, appreciate you coming in, Simon, kicking us off with some and Chris Hernandez came in with some stars on Facebook yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to say thank you. Or if I did, I forgot. I was tired yesterday after 20-hour traveling back from NFL London. But Simon, thank you so much. Keeping the lights on, keeping my forehead good and shiny. We'll get out of here quickly. But Nathan says, didn't they just restructure Matthews? Yeah, and they'll do it again. It's the same thing they did with Matt Ryan, where they restructured it every single year to try and, we're freeing up more cap space. Matt Ryan just agreed to restructure his contract to free up $10 million in cap space. It's kicking the can down the road. So $33 million, you take some of that guaranteed money or salary, you turn it into a signing bonus, extend his contract, and now he's got 4 more years and a dead cap number that's doubled again. And you're stuck with him, which is okay if he's playing at a decent level, but what happens when he drops off? What happens? Then you're stuck with that number. The salary cap is a myth as long as your players are playing well. When they're not, it becomes very, very real when you start having to replace those guys. And appreciate you, Ethan, DWI guy, saying, you can hear you both. Good. Yeah, you weren't frozen for me. So I'm not sure what was going on. I've had a little trouble with StreamYard here in the past few days. And Kevin finishes, he says, the Jags spent like drunken sailors. Yeah, we saw our friend Foye Aluakon out there who was on $15 million a year. And, Russell Gage got a really good contract last year too. So those are some of the things I would want to try and sew up Caleb McGarry sooner rather than later, because I don't want to bid on him in the open market. I don't want him to hit free agency. But Nathan says, yeah, the $33 million and a $30 million cap hit on Jake Matthews. Again, that's the last of the bad deals. Best out is 2024, Nathan, if you're willing to let that $33 million dead cap hit ride. That is a huge money. The highest this year was 21, I think, at left tackle. So you're talking about him being paid number 1 at offensive tackle by a factor of 50%. If they're really building, they should let it happen. They should let it happen and give yourself options on future contracts instead of kicking the can down the road, because that $30 million dead cap hit's going to happen. Do you want to have it now, or do you want to have it in 2024 or 2025? So we will see. Ethan coming in and closing us out. Good show, gents. When is Terrell coming back? AJ could be back this week. They said he was week to week, which meant he wasn't playing last week. But he could be back this week, and he is needed. He's going to be needed. When PJ Walker is tearing up your defense, you're going to need every man you can get for Justin Herbert. So on that note, I think we're going to get out of here, Nick. Between the two of us, we're having trouble with internet. Hopefully we're coming through clear to you, though. I'm not getting any errors on StreamYard, but it seems to be going okay for me. On that note, and Ethan, Simon, thank you so much for coming in. Chris, thank you for yesterday. Everybody, thanks for being here. We had lots of people today watching. If you want to check us out on demand on Facebook or on the podcast, just go to falconspodcast.com and you will see your list of all the pods where you can watch us. So thanks for being here. Busy day yesterday at the NFL trade deadline. Be sure if you want to catch Broncos, catch Nick and Luke tonight on Mile High Huddle. Otherwise, Nick and I will be back tomorrow morning on Mile High Huddle on YouTube for Broncos for breakfast. So until next time, appreciate everybody being here. And have a good day, everybody.